This Roll and Ramble has been requested multiple times by a long-time and very appreciated viewer of the channel, Kratos III. I don't know how you pronounce it, but there you go. The discussion today is about 80s films, specifically 80s films that did the whole building of relationships and bringing people together thing better than anything ever since. And there are three films in particular that I'm thinking about today. The most famous of these is probably The Breakfast Club. The second most famous would be The Legend of Billie Jean. And the third is a somewhat lesser film, 3 O'Clock High. The thing about 80s films is 80s films were not kind. They weren't nice. They weren't trying to be some kind of big message, get across sort of thing. They weren't about the message. They just were honestly kind of brutal and real. There were plenty of films in the 70s that were brutal and real, but a little bit too much so. You've got things like lots of Charles Bronson films, Dirty Harry. The 70s was a time that was dominated pretty heavily by probably the worst crime that the U.S. has ever seen. Perhaps before the whole Black Lives Matter riot thing, anyway. But probably one of the worst crime periods in history was the 1970s, and the films during the 70s reflected the U.S., the general discontent and fear of criminals basically mowing you down in the street. A whole lot of 70s films were like revenge against the bad guys films, where specifically some badass cop would hunt down bad guys and just slaughter them with reckless abandon. And it didn't matter what the rules were, they would just go after the bad guys and make them dead guys, and that was it. The 80s took a more nuanced approach. They didn't try to take all the bad guys and make them into dead guys. Instead, they took actual issues in general. They took actual issues and they made them things that were relatable, and then they would communicate whatever positive message existed through that. Now, granted, we have plenty of admittedly really great 80s films. Like Commando was, oh boy, Commando was some good stuff, man. If you just want to see some raw, brutal, Jim Bro masculinity at its finest with no apologies and not caring about what all the feminazis think about, Commando was it. Commando was friggin' crazy, but it was also definitely a product of its time, B, meant to be more of a masculine spectacle than some kind of realistic film. Really, arguably, Commando was about Arnold Schwarzenegger showing off how strong he was and being a badass. And honestly, there's not much more you could ask than that from that kind of movie. But the movies I'm talking about are not that category. They are more, obviously, they're all teenage, high school movies. High school is often a platform, or a setting, rather, that is used to communicate ideas of change without having to go to the entire society. If you've ever been in high school, as I have, I once was also a professional high schooler. If you've ever been in high school, then you know that high school is a microcosm of whatever society is around you at the time, or at least the perception thereof. And often it can be a pretty brutal and nasty microcosm of said society, with far more problems than society actually has, because teenagers will spend a lot of time looking for things to make other teenagers miserable over. Things as stupid as, oh, you don't wear the approved shoes or whatever. You're not cool because you don't have X, Y, or Z garment or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Take your pick. There's no shortage of things where teenagers can just find... If you're going to have some guy be nasty to you, teenagers will find a way. It does not matter. So, obviously, high school and such is ripe for exploration of some of the more extreme human conditions outside of, say, war or famine or disease or whatever. If you want to explore the human condition and you don't want to do it like Star Trek The Next Generation did, you can do it with a high school setting. A lot of 80s movies are of high schoolers, though not necessarily in high school at the time, as in the case of The Legend of Billie Jean. But, and even arguably The Breakfast Club, though it was supposed to be in high school during detention, it's still in one room for the vast majority of the movie. They're in one room, one library set, and that's it. They don't really venture out. You don't really see much else. There is one scene, I think, that involves the gym. There's really not much else. The Breakfast Club is very... honestly, it feels a lot like a very low-budget movie, yet it somehow is one of the most profound. So I don't want to spoil too much. If you haven't seen the 3 films in question, maybe now would be a good time to stop, go watch them, come back here. What is this? It says it's 6 minutes in, 6.5. Go watch them once you've actually watched them. You can come back and we can talk about it a little more. But I am probably going to spoil some of the movies. So here we go. The first one I want to talk about is the biggest one, The Breakfast Club. The big thing that I saw in The Breakfast Club is you had some kids, I say kids, you know, they use 20-something-year-olds to be teenagers in a lot of these kinds of films. So when I say kids, I use it kind of loosely, but they're supposed to be all in the same high school. And these high schoolers that are like 22, they are all in detention together. Supposedly they've all done something bad to be there. And what starts out as this sort of like, it really just begins with the total dickhead teacher being, guess what? You're going to be surprised at this. A total dickhead. It starts out with him being mean to them and telling them they aren't to leave this room, blah, blah, blah. You know, the good old hard discipline garbage that a lot of people in the 70s and 80s were all about. My dad kind of included, so it hits a little close to home there. And he's like, you don't leave this room, blah, blah, blah. Then, of course, immediately dickhead goes back to his office and just leaves them there. Well, you know what? You leave a bunch of teenagers in a room where they're supposed to do nothing, and you tell them they'll be in trouble if they leave, and then you just bail to a completely separate room. What do you think is going to happen, you moron? So yeah, of course, what you think would happen, happens. Gee, I wonder why that happened. Let me think about it for a few hours. Oh yeah, because they're teenagers. But we wouldn't have a plot otherwise, right? So these teenagers, at first, they're just fighting. But, and like I said, I don't want to spoil the movie, but over the course of the film, they sort of move from arguing with each other, being mean. I mean, really mean. Like, the stuff nowadays, even with the whole, like, far left movie influence, The Message, social justice, woke, whatever you want to call it, you know, the whole girl boss, like, I am better than everyone else because I am a woman, and everybody just auto loses because I'm a woman, and I can beat down a 400-pound man because I'm a woman in a modern Hollywood film. None of that's there. None of it. The guys are guys, but they're different kinds of guys. The girls are girls, but they're different kinds of girls, but they're not girl bosses. There are streaks of feminism, yes, but not the kind of feminism that you know today. Rather more of the traditional alleged beliefs of feminism. And we can forgive this because they're teenagers, so they wouldn't fully understand that feminists are actually psychos that commit terrorist acts and so on and so forth. Look it up. In the 70s, feminists bombed buildings and did all kinds of horrible things. Feminism has never been about equality. It's always been about beating other people down and threatening them to get what you want. Gee, what does that sound like? Sure does sound like the so-called woke movement of today, doesn't it? But yeah, that's kind of the way that all of these things work. That's the way the whole activism thing works. And, you know, second verse, same as the first. It really never changes throughout history. You'll always have these rebel-rousers that are like this. But, of course, this film challenges your notions of all of these stereotypes of the day. You know, you've got the guy that's more of a nerdy guy. You've got, you know, the guy, and soft and such. You've got the guy that's like a total prick You got the quirky girl that is misunderstood. You got the popular girl. And these are the sources of the conflicts. Because, of course, the popular people don't get along with the unpopular people. The nerdy people don't get along with the jockey people. It just, of course, you're going to have all of this conflict. And the film does a great job of taking that conflict and building it along with the circumstances such that these people, through their struggles with, first of all, they fight with each other, but then it drifts towards fighting against the guy that's being a total dick to them while they're supposed to be in detention. And they start to kind of talk amongst each other. They show a little bit of, how would you put it? It's not weakness, but they sort of let their guard down a little bit. Like every once in a while, they just sort of let go of a tiny little tidbit of something that they've been holding inside, but they haven't really wanted to express. Because of course, especially like the jock guy doesn't want to be like, oh, I only posture because I'm weak. That's not the kind of thing that you do. That's the kind of thing that some stupid feminist movie does to tell you that, oh yeah, well, guys are really just, giant pussies that have problems expressing their feelings. When they do express their feelings, they do it in stupid ways. Therefore, men are all bad. And that's kind of the way things go now. But back then, in this movie, the guys expressing their feelings, it starts as little drips. And that's the thing, is these people start out on these like polar opposite camps. They pretty much detest each other. They fight with each other. There is no unity. They do not like each other. They just by default fall into their little group, fall into their position, as we would say in the social hierarchy, and they drift back towards each other over time because they spend hours and hours in this place and they're constantly back and forthing, and through little tiny things that leak through, the others start to see the humanity in the other people that they once hated. And that's the beauty of these films. All of them kind of go along these lines. The Breakfast Club may be the biggest because it takes all of these opposite people, these people that are so far from each other, and shows that if you just let down a little bit of the barrier and you find someone that is not going to be judgmental and an asshole and so on, like, you can find common ground between vastly different people, and you can all, sort of seek solace with each other, because you're all in the human condition. You're just in different aspects of it. So it's not that these people in the Breakfast Club or whatever, and by the way, the movie never even mentions the Breakfast Club except like twice. Once is during some casual conversation with the teacher and some golfing partner or some crap. And then at the end, they mention it again, which I actually was confused for a very long time why the film was called The Breakfast Club due to this. But anyway, these people, they slowly sort of open up to each other. And they realize that, well, wait a minute, I'm a jock and he's not a jock. He's just, he's this like, nerdy guy or whatever that's supposed to get in a high-end school, but his dad's pressuring him to get into, all these schools or whatever, to live up to his potential. But then my dad's over here demanding that, I need to do the sport that he wanted to do or whatever, and I need to live up to my potential. It's like both of our dads are just like beating us down. I don't remember everything about it. I'm sorry if I messed that up, but that's the general way that the film went, is that you had these people and they came together. And they came together by recognizing similarities in their struggles. This is a story as old as time. This is how humanity works. This is the human condition. There's a reason that the concept of a monomyth exists. This archetype where you have a hero that goes through some development. Like at the beginning, they start kind of like, a little low or whatever, like just normal life. Maybe they're up, maybe they're down, whatever. And then they have some events that happen that show you what they go through. Maybe they have some problems. And then some catalyst sets off an adventure. And the adventure causes the person to have to face all of the things that are problems in their lives, building up at some point, through ups and downs. They have some victories, but then they take some hits. And then finally you have a climax where they fight this big, like, final boss sort of person or whatever that represents the ultimate in their suffering or their whatever is, hurting them or making their lives miserable. And then they beat them and things kind of come back to a higher place than when they started. This is the monomyth. This is the template for every hero's journey. The Breakfast Club kind of does that with a lot of heroes. It takes people from all these different walks of life that are in the same school, forces them together. They all realize that they are on the same journey, just with different circumstances that define that journey, but they're all oppressed by their parents and, the behaviors around them, the way that people judge them, and they talk about it. And there are some extremely heartfelt moments in the Breakfast Club especially when they really get into talking about, how their parents put too much on them, or you get the idea. I don't want to ruin it for you. You should go watch this movie. But it's possible. Even, I don't care if you're a hardcore dude or whatever, you might cry and hope that nobody's looking at you. Because the struggles that they go through probably mirror some horrible things that you've had to deal with from your parents or your family or teachers or people that you once respected and that shattered your trust. There's always, everybody has people in their life that they trusted and then that were horrible to them. And there's really no way away from to get out of that. If that wasn't the case, you probably aren't human. That's the Breakfast Club. That's what it did. And no movie ever since has done that, especially in modern times, because modern times, every single possible heartfelt moment, every single moment of connection between two humans, for some reason, they feel the need to, I say this thing that might, be I'm letting the guard down a little bit. Maybe I'm going to get these people to, understand a little sliver of who I actually am. And then, but no, we got to make a snarky remark. Oh, that was funny, wasn't it? Oh, that was so funny. Oh, man. Yeah, I'm not weak. I'm just a douchebag. There's no room whatsoever in modern productions for any kind of actual character building. It just doesn't feel like they can do that anymore. Then we have The Legend of Billie Jean. Now, why did I pick this movie? Because The Legend of Billie Jean, first of all, Lisa Simpson is in it. That's not a joke. Yeardley Smith, I believe that's her name, the actress for Lisa Simpson in The Simpsons, she is in that movie. But The Legend of Billie Jean is probably, if I had to take feminism and I had to carve out only the most positive aspects of it and put it in a movie that perhaps defines positive femininity, The Legend of Billie Jean is it. Because in The Legend of Billie Jean, we see a woman. We see a woman who is young and to some extent vulnerable. She does not come from some sort of rich family. She does not have privileges. None of that kind of stuff. We see just really your sort of average Joe, literally trailer park lady, high school age, of course, because none of these movies can be not high school age, right? Am I right, guys? Billie Jean has something bad happen to her. I really desperately do not want to spoil this film because it's so good. But something bad happens to her that happens to a lot of women, and nobody believes her, and she has to basically seek justice for herself. It doesn't just happen to her, it happens to people she loves. And the whole film is about her seeking justice for herself and for her family, people that she cares about that were harmed. And throughout this film, we see this young woman. She doesn't go and say, I'm a girl boss, and yeah, men just take a big old punch in the nuts from me because I'm so badass. She is not some sort of invincible person. Throughout the movie, Billie Jean suffers, and she suffers a lot. She does suffer various kinds of harm. Mostly psychological, to some extent physical. She is, her reputation is smattered. Just, there's all kinds of suffering that Billie Jean goes through throughout the movie. But she also shows through her actions that what she's doing is just and right, and she gets people on her side to the point that the reason it's called The Legend of Billie Jean is that she literally becomes somewhat of a legend in the movie. And like I said, I'm really desperate not to spoil it for you because it's so good. But The Legend of Billie Jean, just watch it. You'll trust me. It is the best. If I had to call it the best feminist movie ever made, I would. Because it is. Because if you wanted to take feminism and make it not crap, that is the way you would do it. This is a person who, she, through her goodness, brings other people to her side. She doesn't build relationships off of being a badass girl boss. She builds relationship off of being a positive person in general who does what she has to do, even though it might mean getting her hands dirty. But in the end, she's doing it for all the right reasons. And she seeks justice, and she gets justice. And I don't want to spoil how she gets it, because that's why you need to watch the movie. But in the end, you know, obviously with many of these movies, they prevail, but she prevails not because she's some sort of badass woman, but because she's a normal person put in an extraordinary circumstance who did everything that she needed to do to make sure that what was right prevailed. And I don't see that. That is the opposite of the message that all of the modern movies want to present to you. There is no modern movie that actually wants actual positive, normal, vulnerable. You know that word that I said that you're not supposed to use because it means that you're a weakling? But yeah, they love to say be vulnerable, but here you are. Here's a movie about a girl who's a normal girl, not a girl boss. And if somebody hits her or tries to do something bad to her, she has to take it and suffer. Here's a movie about that where, you know, she overcomes. And yet, that's not what we see today. The only kind of movie that we see today that portrays women in a really positive light, well, I mean, are there any? I don't know. You leave a comment if you think of one. The Legend of Billie Jean takes a person, a young woman, who is, you know, inherently not believed by society, and they all trust the guy and not her, and puts her on this journey, the hero's journey. And she comes out on top in the end, because of course she does. That's what you expect from a movie like that. But movies don't do that anymore. You don't get the genuine connection like that anymore. Now it's this unrealistic, everybody likes her, even if she does them wrong, and if everybody doesn't like her, then she beats the crap out of them effortlessly, and therefore they don't matter. It really is just a bunch of spoiled teenagers trying to make movies talking about how it is that their parents, they were actually wrong, and it turns out that the stupid spoiled teenage brats were actually right, blah, 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 blah. And look at how wrong you were, my mom and dad, if I even had a dad in the household. That's what the movies today are like. The genuine connection is not there, and for some reason, I feel like it's not going to be there for a long time. Now, granted, sometimes things break through, but I don't think The Legend of Billie Jean would be made today. I don't think that it's a thing that would happen. The closest I think I've ever gotten to it is a film called Lou, L-O-U. And Lou is about this badass old woman who, I guess she has a ton of military training or whatever, but she just plows through all the bad guys, and she's accompanied by another woman who does not plow through all the bad guys because she's not a girl boss, military, whatever. But even Lou, you know, to some extent has these overtones of, well, I'm just a badass old woman that can plow through anyone because I'm a military trained lady. But you know what? Even then, she's still got vulnerabilities, and she does not go through the whole movie unscathed. And that's critical, but it's nowhere near The Legend of Billie Jean. The third film, and I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, but the third film I chose because it is lesser. A lot of people do not know it, but it's called 3 O'Clock High. It's from the 80s, and it's not quite the same thing. You don't have people coming together. In 3 O'Clock High, you have one man trying desperately not to get in a fight. That's the whole movie. Okay, most of the movie. I don't want to spoil it either. It is not quite on par with the other two, but it's not far off. It's got a 7.1 on IMDb. I know because I looked it up right before making this video. The whole movie is about this guy who is in the bathroom, and this big, bully whatever guy is in the bathroom, and he touches his shoulder just so he can ask him a question or whatever. And the guy gets pissed and challenges him to a fight at 3 o'clock. It's like, we're going to fight at 3 o'clock. And most of the movie is the guy trying to get out of it. But despite everything he does, and holy crap, do you have to watch this movie just to see everything he does to try and get out of facing this fight that he's going to have to deal with. By the end of it, this guy does what he has to do. And it's not quite the same feel-good, people get together thing. It is a bit of a different movie relative to the others, but I think that it's important because it shows that even if it's just one person, the character development, this guy is a wimp. He starts out being a wimp getting threatened by a big bad bully. And you are definitely going to get put in the hospital at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Mind you, this is in the 80s when people getting into a fight didn't immediately get thrown in jail and put through for felony assault charges. You could actually fight it out with people and you wouldn't end up in prison for 5 years. So these people are supposed to fight at 3 o'clock, and he spends the whole movie trying to get out of it. And in doing so, you start to see his character growth, because even though he tries to get out of it, there's really no way that he can. And no matter what he does, there's not much he can do. Although I will say, and like I said, I don't want to spoil it, but I will say that he does actually find a way out. At some point, he finds a way out. I'll leave it to you to find out what he does with that. But make no mistake, this is a character building day for this guy. This is like the definitive, I am a wimp and I have this impossible situation and I have to deal with it and I don't want to deal with it and I tried to get out of it, but here's how I dealt with it movie. And that's what makes it so great. That's why I put it in here, even though it's not The Breakfast Club, it's not The Legend of Billie Jean, where you've just got this hero. This guy is a giant pussy, and most of the film he spends being a massive wussy pussy boy. And yet, in the end, he triumphs. I'll leave it up to you to find out how. But you don't see that anymore. You definitely do not see that anymore with Hollywood movies, because men aren't allowed to be men. Men aren't allowed to triumph like that. They don't show a weak man become a strong man anymore. That's just not a thing. I don't remember anything that I've seen in the past 10 or 15 years that I've ever seen a weak man become a strong man and, beat down the opposition, but not necessarily with his fists. Just male character growth is like a dead art in a lot of movies. And it really makes me sad. Anyway, that's probably enough talking about all of this. I hope that I've illustrated why these various 80s high school drama movies, why a lot of them did what they were supposed to do with building character and people coming together and so on. Just generally taking people and putting them through the ringer to make them better people. So much better than anything that I can think of in modern history. And once again, I feel the responsibility here at the end of this video to say that it's not that these movies don't exist at all today, but a lot of times you find them being smaller features, or maybe they're just some Netflix thing that's not as popular. They rarely get as much spotlight and spectacle. They rarely get theatrical releases. A lot of the stuff that does this right is not Hollywood. It's not big name stuff. It's going to be more indie stuff. It is out there. People still make movies that aren't complete trash, but I don't know that a lot of them could even hope to touch things the way that an 80s movie does. It's a rare gem at this point, if anything does give me the same feeling that one of these 80s movies does, where the people get crushed through some sort of machinery of society, and then they come out stronger for it at the end. And I know that that's the archetypical hero's journey or monomyth, but it just, Hollywood kind of doesn't do a great job with it anymore. They might go through the steps of the monomyth. In fact, while I'm thinking about it, if you waited this long, here's your reward. There's a book called Save the Cat that completely lays out the template for every Hollywood movie in the past 20 years. And if you read Save the Cat, or even just find an online copy and browse through it, read some excerpts, you'll realize that this book laid out a formula, and everyone in Hollywood has used it ever since for the past 20 years or so. I think it came out in 2008. Everyone in Hollywood has made a movie with this exact, beat for beat, this is how a movie should go. And it maximizes revenue, but it makes everything ultimately feel monotonous. You are not alone. Everything does feel the same. And if you don't like this samey thing, maybe you should go back in time. Maybe you should check out the 80s. Honorable mention, I never watched it enough to really get into it, but it does have some coming of age elements that are really good. Oh crap, what was it called? Oh, I lost it. I was gonna say it and I lost it. Please help me. I don't remember. I've lost it. But it was about like these football players and there were some cars involved. That is the worst summary of a movie ever. What was it called? You'll figure it out. Somebody in the comments will tell you exactly what I'm talking about. It had like a 3-syllable word and then a 1-syllable word. But I'm drawing a blank right now. It's pretty terrible, actually. So anyway, put your favorite 80s coming of age, whatever movie in the comments below. And I hope that this has been entertaining and educational. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.